Panel, which is about changing the street dynamic. And I love what David Kennedy said this morning, and it's going to guide what we discuss. We're going to talk about how we do what we do and what we can learn from one another. So what I'm going to do first is have each of the panelists, first of all, I'm Jorja Illipe. Good afternoon. And I am from the little village of Los Angeles, where if you talk to some folk, they say street intervention was born. I don't know if that's true, but we have been struggling and, in a certain way, succeeding with the issue of communities and changing the street dynamic. And I am truly excited to be here today and sort of guiding. I don't like the idea of moderating because we are here for action, not modulation. So I'm going to be sort of guiding our panel to the extent I can or want to. We're going to allow some time at the end for questions. But what I'm first going to do is have each of the panelists give their elevator description, briefly, what they do, where they're doing it, and then we're going to dive into the issues. So, we're going to share or tell me what's best? Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Fatma Zahra. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I am at the National Network for Safe Communities, and I'm the Associate Director of the Intimate Partner Violence Intervention. So I'm really excited to be here.
Good afternoon, everybody. Quincy Smith, Detroit, Michigan. I am the community organizer for Ceasefire Detroit. My role is to pretty much coordinate our outreach efforts, working on community partnerships, and bridging that gap between law enforcement and the community. So glad to be here.
And good afternoon, everybody. My name is Damon Baker. I'm the Director of Training for New York State SNUG initiative, which is funded by the Division of Criminal Justice Services here in New York State. And we work with 11 different cities across the state of New York. So from Buffalo to Wyandanch, and for you guys who aren't familiar with New York, that's about 450 miles. So a lot of traveling on my shoes, so don't mind the bottom of my shoes here. They're very worn.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sheldon Smith. I'm the resource coordinator for the Safer Foundation. We work with Chicago Violence Reduction Strategies to assist with helping people find employment and all the wraparound services that's requested that they need.
Okay, so let's begin with what do we share? What are our must-haves? What are part of all that we do in changing the street dynamic that we've got to have? What are those core components? Now, Quincy and Sheldon, I'm going to start with them because their last name is Smith. They're not related, but I'm going to pick on the non-Smith brothers, and I'm going to pick on you first, Sheldon. What are the must-haves? What do we need in changing the street dynamic?
Well, with the street dynamic, first of all, we need community support. And what I mean by community is the employer-committed community, also the hospitals and all the client services wraparounds. Also in the city of Chicago, what we did was we stole from New York. We got the, we took from New York, I can contest to that. We have the municipal IDs now. Majority of the problems is with the city of Chicago, our clients wasn't able to afford the $20 state IDs. So now what happens is with the municipal IDs, they can go in, still get these temporary jobs, get the jobs that they need, get their medical. They can get medical, RX meds. They can also get a library card at the same time. And let's talk about the library card. The library card is very important because our parents work with their children. So they go together, they do educational services, and everything with that ID, they can get in free with the city of Chicago. The Museum of Science and Industry, they can get into the Shared Aquarium, they can get into a lot of the festivals. They can't get in for free, but they can get 5% off with the festivals with the multiple IDs, with the security IDs. But the most important piece is you cannot be in our community and say you're not willing to help. And what that means is this: we bought an RV, so we go to where our clients don't want to come to. So the RV will show up in the middle of a rally. It will show up in the middle of a drug pass out. It would show up in the middle before the police do their raids or whatever the case may be. Give them the support that they need. But most important, that RV carries free cell phones that's given from Walmart. They give their blood pressure checks if we have a volunteer from the healthcare profession there. They also get food if they need food. We don't do food bags anymore, so we get $50 Target cards so they can go to Target and get whatever they need. That's the buy-in. Once they sign up with us, then they have to come to us, or we come to them. We'll drive up in that big old RV in front of your house and find out exactly what it is that you need. Because sometimes it may not be for the client. It could be for the family. Saturday, just real quick before because I'm real nervous. I'm shy, can't you tell? That this one particular family was about to get put out. And through the city of Chicago, what happens is we work with that landlord, and we got that family a reprieve. As I left yesterday, the rent was paid up for the next 6 months. So what we did was to show we had to get credibility. And that credibility to change that is not being on the side end and saying, hey, call the police, we don't want you hanging there. So we have to do something about it to change that dynamic.
For me, it's real simple. It's who are the boots on the ground? Who are the ones who are making, that contact, right? Who are the ones who have that real street credibility that are trusted in the community? There's a lot of folk in Detroit that want to do this work, that think they can do the work, right? That may have the passion to do it. They may even have the skill set to do it. But their ego becomes bigger than the work. So those kind of folks you kind of have to cipher through. I think they're useful, right? But to be a part of this specific team, we have to be really, really intentional. First of all, for me, it's what is your personal story? What drives you to do this work? And for me, we don't look at it as a job. We look at this as it's ministry, is what it is, right? And so it has to be something connected to your personal story that really drives you, right? It has to be passion fueled. And so we're really careful about who we bring on the team. But having that, having those folks, real strategic about bringing those folks on. And then it's keeping our promise. That's major, right? When we say we're going to do something, got to follow up. And don't commit to doing something that you know you cannot do, okay? So those two things are must-haves.
I think it's important. You work with intimate partner violence. Tell us what the must-haves are.
Sure, the must-haves are having a trauma-informed lens as best as possible. I think we've made a lot of strides in the domestic violence movement in really outreaching and supporting victim survivors of domestic violence by having compassion and having understanding as to understanding maybe why they were in an abusive relationship and possibly why they're staying in an abusive relationship. This shift in thinking and being more trauma-informed has resulted in more safety in the sense that victim survivors feel more comfortable accessing services, reaching out for help from law enforcement and community-based agencies. I think, what's helpful to kind of keep in mind here, you're probably wondering, what is this intimate partner violence intervention spokesperson saying here? I think we can learn a lot and do a lot of information sharing amongst each other. There is a roadmap that's been created by the domestic violence movement, and why not share that information? Why not be as intentional and as trauma-informed about group-involved violence and being sensitive to their needs? What are we doing as practitioners and providers in kind of taking a step back? It's not just asking questions, why may this person be a group-involved member? It's also, okay, let me understand the reason why they might be involved in a group. Let me understand why it might be difficult to leave a group. Let me also understand what was it like for this person to possibly be in a group where they witnessed a shooting or they witnessed another group member being threatened. How is that understanding and compassion going to then be relayed to other victims of crime and have more effective support and outreach as a result?
Damon.
I'm last here. So my must-haves, I have three as I think about it, and I wasn't prepped for these questions, so I've got three here. The first is I believe you have to have buy-in, and since I work for state government, you have to have buy-in from the state government, right? You have to have buy-in from some governmental force because all these programs take money to run. In New York State, we're very fortunate that we have buy-in from the highest piece of state government, which is the governor's office, with a lot of the stuff that we're doing. And not only that, but we have oversight at DCJS where we're actually working, we're on the ground. Like I go out to every site once a month. My supervisor goes out to every site once a month to actually be able to see the work that's getting done. So, there's that buy-in. We're able to report back of, things that are happening in real time, issues that are coming up. We're able to say, you know what, we have this issue. We're able to work through with our staff. We're able to support them in different ways. It's not just here, take the money and give us the results. It's here, take the money, and we're going to help support you to make sure that everything is going so you'll be as successful as possible. The second one is I think about what Mr. Smith is saying here is that we have to have the right people, right? Just because your credibility for us, doing street outreach, just because you've been to jail or just because, you were a guy in the street doesn't mean that you're right for this work. We have to make sure that those people that are working with us really want to see better outcomes for their communities and for the young people that are in the communities. So that's a really big one, and that's the one that we struggled with in the beginning, but we've gotten better as time has gone on to picking the right people to work. I mean, we thought when we first started, we had to have these guys that were just, had all the big names in the neighborhood, but we found out they weren't in it to do the work. They were in it to keep their name up in the neighborhood, and we found out that's not what we wanted. We wanted somebody who's in it really to do the work. And the third thing is, we have to have the right people that we're working with. I mean, I've heard that as the theme is make sure you're working with the right people, right? We even looked at it when we first started. We said, we got to go out and grab 15 to 20 people. You've got to see them a certain amount of times per month, and you just got to go do it. And we looked and said, are we really working with the right people? We'd rather quality over quantity, right? Because when you're talking about having quality, that means you're going to spend the right amount of time with that person, because who wants somebody that's just doing a job? I have to see you a certain amount of times. I'm here for 10 minutes. How you doing? Everything's okay, and you're out the door. But we said if we can lower the amount of time, the amount of people that we're working with, because we know it's only a small percentage of people causing the violence, we can say, you know what, instead of spending 15 minutes, we can spend 2 hours with you now, right? We'll have a more profound effect on what it is you're doing. We'll have more influence on your life, and we'll hopefully start being that person that you pick up the phone and call when things are going wrong. So those were my three things, really to have some buy-in from governmental agencies to say, you know what, this is worth it, and it's not just worth talking about it on campaign speeches, but actually putting your money to where your mouth is. And I mean, for us, we started off with, when I started in 2014, with about $2 million in budget. This year, because we did get some money from the Office of Victim Services to deal with the trauma in our offices and in the work we do, we're up to about $8 million. So when you start talking about a social investment and government putting their money where their mouth is, they're doing it. And we've definitely started off with probably 60 to 70% turnover. We're probably down to about 35 to 40% turnover now. So that means we're getting the right people and we're keeping the right people. And lastly, we lowered the amount of people that we're working with so that we make sure we're dealing with the highest risk youth, and we're making sure that we're being able to make a difference in their lives.
Okay, so we've heard a lot of themes already. The issue, I love the story of the library card, and that really fits in with the big little things. The library card, driver's license, documents that people need. But one thing we're hearing across the board here is credibility. And the people that are working together must have credibility, and it's got to be a calling. It can't be a 9-to-5 job. So here's a two-part question to consider. How do you make sure the right people are at the table? How do you find them? How do you engage them? And who are those right people? Because I'm going to put Fatma on sort of blast first, because I'm not hearing a whole lot about women who are also among, right? Okay, I got to say it. And that's not to undercut men. But women are also needing to be at the table and part of the credibility, part of the movement, part of what we're doing. So I'm going to put Fatma first. Who's got to be at the table? How do we find them? How do we make sure we've got the right people?
That's a great question. I think it's really important to have a diverse group of people, a task force of people that want and are committed to this work. It's not just a criminal justice intervention, a legal intervention. the most successful strategies are those that also have a vibrant and sound support and outreach component as well. So we need, mental health professionals, we need social workers, we need community members. Community members play a huge role. I think one important thing to keep in mind, getting the right people at the table, are those who put their egos aside. No one's the expert, right? Everyone brings something valuable to the table. There's a space for everybody's voice. So being intentional of not just making it heavy through one-sided partnerships, just really bringing all sorts of systems in place.
I don't think it's a cookie cutter way to do this.
Yes.
It's a lot of it is trial and error. We brought some folks on and they just didn't fit, and then we had to have a conversation.
And not be afraid.
Yeah, and not be afraid to, and have those uncomfortable conversations, right? Because we got to get it right. People's lives are at stake here, so we can't play around with this thing, right? So for us, back to your point about the females, and we had that same thought process, right? Diversity, right? Making sure that we had folks on the team that can reach different dynamics, group of people. So we brought on a young lady from Southwest, is a largely Hispanic community. So we wanted to make sure we brought on somebody who was bilingual, that can kind of talk their language. They're familiar with that neighborhood. That's where they grew up, right? Have a lot of relationships there. So we brought a female on, and she's dynamic. Corinthia, she's dynamic at what she does. We brought in a female resource counselor, right? So we kind of have two roles with our street outreach. We got boots on the ground, and then we got folks who are responsible really for making sure that they manage folks getting to the actual resource, okay? So, we were finding that, we had guys, a part of our, street outreach team, they had a strong skill set, right? But there were some, components that were missing, and folks were kind of falling through the cracks. So we wanted to make sure we had all our bases covered. So we brought in a resource coordinator. His name is Alvin Sims. He's actually here in New York today at the conference. And he's responsible for making sure that's a coordinated approach with our resource counselor. So we have a female resource counselor and a male resource counselor to make sure that folks are actually getting connected to services. But we brought them on for that reason of diversity. Yep.
Well, ours is a little bit different. What we did was we took to the community. Our young men who are the ones who are affected with the violence, we've implemented with St. Sabina, Father Flager. Have anybody heard of Father Flager in Chicago? Father Flager, what happens is that everybody has to be vetted through him. No one works with outreach team if you're not vetted by Father Flager. What happens is this, we may have 12 prospects. We'll put 12 gentlemen to those prospects. We'll have those gentlemen come back to the table. They will vote on who should be at the table. Because I can make the decision, but I'm not being shot at. We are not bringing them to the table. That's the problem. So when they come to the table and they can say, well, you know what? He did do this. He helped me with this. He stopped me with this. Well, he didn't do anything. He just let me do whatever the case may be. So the peer-to-peer, they vote on who should be helping them or not.
That's a good question, right? Who do we bring to the table, and who's the right people at the table? So, like everybody else, it was a lot of trial and error for us. In the beginning, we thought there were certain type of people that we bring to the table, and we had to have those hard conversations. And we realized having those hard conversations weren't being fair to two people. First, the people we are serving, because there's this continuity going on. You're working with somebody one day and they're gone the next day, so that's not fair to the people you're working with. It's also not fair to the team and that person, right? You get them used to a lifestyle and then you take it away from them. So we really changed our vetting process. We made sure that if you wanted to do this job, you had to come out and volunteer first, right? You had to be a part of a volunteer. You had to show up, right? When you're not getting paid, you still got to come out and do some of this stuff, right? So we wanted you to be able to see it. We wanted you to see this is what we do, so you're not going to be disillusioned when you walk in the door. Also, we involved our staff. We asked our staff, listen, this guy's going to come into, or this woman's going to come into this place. How are they going to do it? right? Are you going to be comfortable working with this person? Are you okay working with this person? And we also used our partnerships with law enforcement, right? Because we still can't have anybody with open cases or is actively under investigation, because once you come in the door and you get investigated, now you're part of us. Right. Or you get arrested, you're part of us, and it looks bad on the team. So we did our partners with law enforcement and said, listen, is this guy still active? We don't want to know, what he did 10 years ago, but is he still currently active, or does he have open case? And that was a no. So I mean, we went through all these different vetting processes to make sure that we had the right people at the table. And and you talk about bringing women. I know one of our better program directors is a woman, strong woman, right? And the good thing about her is, she can say, I go out in the field with the guys. So I spend 8 hours actually out in the field watching them do the work. And I just see how women can talk to our young men differently than a man can talk to them. And some of the things that they can say, they can tell them, pull up your pants, boy. And he'll look and say, all right, I'll pull up my pants, and it won't be a problem. And, one of our program directors, who's one of our better directors, and she'll challenge you. She loves to challenge you. She brings that into the room and brings that to the table. And that diversity of thought is really what we really need. And part of it too was we decided that everybody didn't have to have a criminal background to do street outreach, right? Because there's a lot of good youth football coaches, right? There's a lot of good clergy that have been doing this work in these neighborhoods. Right. Those guys that were always solid, that had influence, that might have known the guy from when he was this small. And that guy's always respected. So we brought some of those people, because diversity of thought means that programs can grow and get better. So we really brought in different people from different backgrounds. Yes, you have to have some people who have that involvement in the criminal justice so they understand what's going on, but there has to be some different people, because if we're building skill sets, right, we all have to learn from each other. So what skill you're not good at here, this person might be able to be good at and help you navigate some of those systems that you weren't good at.
And if I just may add on, you guys bring up such excellent points, but I think it's important for us to also remember we can't assume who's going to have that impact on a person, on a victim, right? I was fortunate enough to do a men's support group a couple of years ago, and part of the fear and concern was, I'm a woman running this support group, how are they going to feel comfortable talking about the violence that they've experienced? In fact, what they said is, I was really worried if a man was going to run this group. I was afraid to be vulnerable. So having options available to young men of who they can speak to, who they can talk to, goes a really long way. Again, it's different ways of getting to the same place.
I just want to piggyback on that. She's 100% correct. Our Chicago University, they do every year either at the Cook County Jail or Stateville. They only send in our female students to go in and talk to our men, because they won't talk to us, because now that mask is on with us. But with them, they break down. We found out some of them was molested, some of them was homeless, they was eating out the garbage. A lot of the stuff that we take for granted by taking a bath at home or just getting put out, we living off grandma's Social Security check. So a lot of stuff that goes on that drove the violence to make them the way they are, then went out and found that false love. That's where we find out about that at.
That's powerful, because I also think sometimes we get caught up in a formula. We're going to do it this way. We're going to do it this way. It's working this way. We can't. And your examples are so powerful. Now, another place we get caught up in a formula is with leadership. Who leads? And that's a dangerous formula, because there's also burnout. There's all kinds of things. So how do we keep, when we are changing the street dynamic, which is one step forward, 3 steps back, it is constant. Who leads? How do they lead? How do we make sure there's also planning for new leadership? Damon. You're going to say, we didn't prepare for this question either, right?
We did all these phone calls, right? Nobody said any of these questions on the phone call. So how are you supposed to do this, right?
I failed in moderator school, okay?
Did a bad job. I'm going to write that in my review when I do my review here. But, that's a great question, right? Because part of my job as director of training is always being able to develop this new leadership, because we have to be able to develop new leadership. We have to have new blood, And so what we've done at the state is that we're constantly in contact with our leadership. since we are 450 miles apart, we use video conferencing technology. Like for 1 week, we'll go over data. We'll talk about data with them and what's their new objectives, and does anybody have anything that other places can come visit and see they could be part of, where we could show strength in numbers. And then 1 week, we do a training call where we say, you know what? Give us something you're good at. We're going to pair you with somebody that you normally wouldn't work with. You guys get on the phone, do a PowerPoint presentation, and present it out to the rest of the group. And, we have two thoughts in that, right? One, you get used to presenting ideas. You get some success in being able to present. And also, now we're resume building, right? Isn't it great to say I was able to present on a statewide level to statewide directors? And so we're always building. And so we talk about our leaders, to our leaders is, your job is to prepare that person for their next position, right? If you're not preparing that person to take your job, then you're not doing a good job in leadership. And we do understand that burnout comes with this, because your phone doesn't stop ringing, because you're dealing with all types of issues. And so we were fortunate enough, like I said earlier, to get money from the Office of Victims Services to implant social workers in each of our street outreach sites, right? And it's great to be able to have social workers work with victims of violence, but they're going to work with our people too, because our people go through things, and we have to have somebody there to be able to help them out. So leadership development is always what we're big on doing. We even make it mandatory in the contract, which being able to affect policy, is that you have to have a certain amount of training hours per year to continue to be certified. So now everybody's going to get a certain amount of training hours, because you know what? If we're always getting trained on the best and newest things, then we're always going to be in the forefront and not behind playing catch up. And so that's what we're always looking to do. So we're doing these things to build leadership, build capacity, because we want our people to be seen as more than just street outreach workers, right? You mean so much more to this community than just a guy who can go out in the street from 4 to 12 at night and only deal with high-risk kids. Well, what are you going to do in 5 years? What are you going to do in 10 years? And if we can build that capacity, we're going to build leadership in this community so these communities can take care of themselves. And that's what we're looking to do.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful.
That's good. So my director is in the back there. So the director for Ceasefire Detroit. But I think Detroit does a really, really good job at understanding our lanes. Everybody has their lane. Everybody has what they're good at, right? One mission, right? One goal in mind, right? But the outreach team, and that's what we're focused on, outreach, they feel empowered to carry out the mission. But that only comes from leadership, right? Even from the chief of police.
Yes.
Right? And if it's not buy-in on that level, then forget the whole thing. Forget the whole thing. Throw the whole thing away. Seriously.
Without those
Without
leaders buying in.
Exactly. Without the chief of police buying into this, right? And setting a tone, not just with law enforcement, but community. He values the work that we do. That matters, right? And, in just that, my team, they feel comfortable about going out there, and because they know they have the support that they need. On the law enforcement side, which really, in Detroit, it's 3-part led. You have community, you have law enforcement, you have, your faith-based community, but the work came in through law enforcement. That's how the work came in, right? And that's fine. That's understandable. But, it would be a problem if, our chief, which originally he didn't have buy-in at first. When his first calling, he talks about it openly. I was not with this whole ceasefire thing. I didn't agree with it. He didn't like where the call-ins were held. He didn't like the message. He didn't like this. He didn't like that. Took some time, right? And then, he saw the progress. He saw, just the role that community played, the role that outreach played, the role that our service providers played, and he saw the impact. And that began to turn his mindset towards the work. And now he's just one of our biggest fans and just a huge component at what we do. But I think for us, it's really just everybody understanding their lane. And then 2, we're at the table all the time to talk about, have conversations about what are the challenges, what are the things that, we need to work on, what's working, what's not working, right? Every other week, we're at the table trying to figure it out to get better.
Well, one with us, what we're trying to do is what we don't have in Chicago. Me and my counterpart was talking about it today. We do not have a seat at the table with the police department.
Okay.
But what happens is
different.
We don't have that. But what happens is that they will come out to us and tell us what we think we should know. but we don't hear where that spot fire went off, where they think the next shooting is going to be, so we can be there to do. We don't have that. Right. We're not there with them yet. But our new mayor, Mayor Lightfoot, is, I'm just going to say that. Our new mayor is really on a, anybody from Chicago in here? You from Chicago? You don't live there, though, do you? Okay, well, I can talk about it. Our new mayor,
tell the truth, Sheldon, tell the truth.
She is really, seriously, she's really on the violence in Chicago. She really is. So she's hammering our superintendent. She's been hammering him so much the man had blood clots. But, and I swear I'm not lying. I'm not. He just got out of the hospital yesterday because of, I'm serious. So what happens is this. They can police their way out of it, but until we come to the table and discuss what we think that we should be, or we do it together, because we don't have the answer. They don't either, because in Chicago, our west sides and south sides wouldn't be a little baby Iraq. But the point of the matter is, it's getting better because of the community, not policing. The community is buying in. They are doing the things that they need to do to support our young men. We just started an initiative called Neighborhood Cleanup. You're already on the corner, so guess who we're hiring? The people on the corner. Throw a vest on them. They make that little $14, $15 an hour, and they get a check. Friday, you roll up with that big old safer truck, and you pay them. They be like, what is this? I got a check? What? Yeah, so that's our first initiative. It's not going to last, but what happens is once we're at that table, I'm jealous. I need to come out there and find out, bring our superintendent out there to you guys, because on Mondays, we're not at the table.
Good.
And that's where everything goes on, and I'm going to really be hammering that. So I might be shooting for you and Garland to come out and talk to our law enforcement piece. But the most important piece is the community, though. They have to come to the table. They have to come to the meetings. Father Flager is our, and I'm keep using his name because he's our cheerleader. He's our champion. Everyone deals with Father Flager. Everybody loves Father Mike. But when it comes down to get into the police department, that door stops. So if we know where the violence is tending from, if we know what's getting ready to happen, we have people out on the ground. When you also say pertaining to burnout, we have that. Because in Chicago, on the west sides and the south sides, we're running 24 hours a day. You can't do that with 12 people. They crisscross in the cities. And my partner that's here today, she lost her son. And she beats the streets every day. Would you please stand up? Thank you. She tirelessly beats the streets. She beats the streets because she does not want, and I'm not going to tell her story, but I'm going to let her do that. But she don't want another mother to go through what she's going through. And the panel that was going on today was talking about mothers. She was ready. She was ready, but also it's not. 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, a mother. So that's the most important piece in Chicago, when the mothers get to the table, so therefore those young men can really hear from the mothers and know their pain and know the love. That's when we'll be able to tackle that.
And I think also Sheldon said an important phrase. We're not there yet. Changing the street dynamic it's got its own dynamic. And I think we learn from one another here. Fatma, leadership, bringing it on, watching for burnout.
Yeah, I think it's important to have, again, diverse voices at the table. I think you want to make sure that leadership is willing to listen to other people, really have that ability to welcome new ideas. Welcome new ideas. I'm just thinking about from a law enforcement perspective even. Safety planning that is done with, just group involved members can be a checklist. Why just make it a checklist? Why not change it? Why not make it dynamic? Why not learn from the domestic violence field and be creative and adapt other models and make it your own? Make safety planning something that's actually genuine. Make it something that's constant and ever changing. That's going to help change street dynamics as well, because people on the ground are going to know, okay, you care enough about me to ask these questions consistently, and that's good leadership, somebody who's willing to take those risks and changes and learn from others.
What do you think?
What do I think? I hear a lot about having police at the table, and I think they're a valuable partner. And they have to be a partner, right? Because no matter what we say, if you in street outreach, you don't like the police, but guess what? They're part of our community. And they're going to be in our community, and so they have to be at the table. I know in New York with us, we've been fortunate enough to fund both ends. So we fund the police departments too in our GIVE initiative, which is gun-involved violence elimination, where they do the call-ins and hotspot policing and community. I'm going to get it confused, but we call it SEPTED, but it's basically community policing through environmental design and all those different things that the police departments do. And part of it is that in their contract, they have to work with street outreach, right? So they have to work with street outreach in their contract. So now when we're tying money to making sure we have a seat at the table, it looks different. That dynamic looks different. Now in our contract, we're talking about you have to meet with our program manager once a month, to talk about the data, to talk about the shootings, talk about the top 15 list, to talk about where the hot spots, provide us with maps so that we can see where we're going. Let us know within 2 hours when the shooting occurs. So you start to build these relationships and these trust between parties, because what you see is once you get to the table and you see everybody wants the same thing, we're just going about it differently, those conversations look different. And what you hear from our guys when we first started years ago was, I don't mess with the police.
Right.
And then now all of a sudden you hear them say, oh, you know what, I called my police liaison, he called me back and he gave me this. And all of a sudden, you hear people that have done 10, 15 years in jail and say, you know what, if I would have known this police officer when I was a kid, I might have went that route. And that starts making a big difference in changing that dynamic and that exposure.
One of the reasons law enforcement will come to the table is because this work works. This work is effective in bringing down crime. We see that. We've certainly seen it in Los Angeles, where we have 40-year lows. Now, the question is, how do we show that the work works? How do you communicate that? How do you get researchers to help you with this? I love what Eric Cumberbatch said this morning. Academics don't know how to write. We always find the most complicated way to say things. On the other hand, you need it. How do you show what you do works? How do you get someone to vouch for that? How do you put the message out there? Are you there yet? Are you trying to? Have you had false starts? What's happened?
I'll go because my guys always say I'm the data guy. Okay. I'm always on them about data. That's my thing. Is that we actually invested in it, right? We invested a 5-year contract for over $300,000 in a database to capture our work. And not only did we invest in the database and say, well, here's the database, don't use it. We invested in it and said, you know what, we're going to expect you to use it. We're going to expect you to use it every day. We're going to expect you to put in what you do daily. We expect you to put in all the contacts you have with the people you're working with. And this is all anonymous. So it's not names or addresses or anything. It's really just ethnicity and year of birth, right? And we're going to expect you to put in when you're doing a mediation, when you're having a conversation between two groups. Put that in so you could tell the story. So now when shootings are down in our area, and you could go now and talk to your police department, and you can talk to community, and you could say, you know what, we're down 30% of shootings. Part of that is because we have 17 participants that we're working with, that we're seeing X amount of times per month. We've done 15 mediations this year compared to 12 mediations last year, and we're able to tell the story using our data. And, a lot of times people use data and it just doesn't go anywhere. Well, part of my job is to look at that data, and I'm looking at it weekly. I'm sending notes. I'm sending reminders. I'm sending out gold stars. I'm sending out brown stars, when you have to. But it's because we know that for that buy-in, you have to have some type of data. You have to have something to say, this is what we did. This is how we did it. And so we're really getting good about, capturing what you did. Take credit for this work you're doing, because you're out here risking your life. You're doing great work. Take some credit for it. And at the same time, because if we stay on top of you, now you can become a case manager, right? You're able to move on. You work for these agencies that have these multiple programs. Why can't you do that? Because now you have the experience of doing more than just street outreach, but now you can say, well, I've used a comprehensive database that was okayed by the state of New York, and here I can do case notes, I can document what I'm doing, I can learn typing. I went from one finger typing to 2-finger typing to looking at the keyboard to not looking at the keyboard, right? So we're building skills in our people as well. So we are capturing the data, so when we do have those meetings at the table, we're not just talking about stories, we're talking about stories and backing it up with the data that says what we're doing.
Yeah. I'm interested, Quincy, you had
just
an
real quick.
reaction.
Yeah, just real quick. I think we're good at capturing the data, right? We use a shared document, an online document, right? Any engagement, anything that we do, it's immediately documented, right? It's a living, breathing document, it's real time. You want to see what such and such did yesterday, log on, boom, everything's right there. And it's simple. It's drop down. Where were you? Who were you with? What time was it, right? What day of the week? What happened? What was the outcome? And so we're really, big on that and making sure we're capturing the work on a daily basis. How we get that message out and how we, right, expose the outcomes, from a community side, I think we have to do a better job. Mm-hmm. There are press conferences, right? And the chief gets up there and says, shootings are down in this specific precinct. Thanks to Ceasefire and the work that that Ceasefire is doing, and from a law enforcement side, it's communicated. But I think we got to do a better job on the community side at getting that message out there.
Ours sucked. We were doing the work, but we was not. That evidence-based practice is now the norm. That's the new Bible. We were horrible with it. I'm not gonna lie, I was over it. I take my stuff with that camera on. We sucked. We were doing more work, but we wasn't proving it. Mm-hmm. The funders was like, we paid y'all XYZ. What y'all doing? Well, we did blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. That's a blank canvas. Yeah. So what we did was we went to the Chicago Crime Lab, and we threw ourselves under the mercy of the Chicago Crime Lab. And what they did was similar to Detroit. We stole a drop-down box. We stealing a lot, ain't we? And the system is called Axiom. And what Axiom does is when you first meet the client, what's the client's involvement, what's his status now, where he's at 30 days, where he's at 60 days, where he's at 90 days. When we get to that 120, that's when we get paid. But the point of the matter is we never get to the 120. Because the clients may need, he or she just may need that immediate fix right then and there. So we'll take care of that need. And then we do phone stalking. We'll call him, and we'll say, well, I called him 30 times. He all right. But now to the point to where that what we did was, when you're talking about evidence-based, Safer, we just started our own construction. Because a lot of our clients wanted construction, but no construction company would hire them. Mm-hmm. So Walsh Construction in the city of Chicago said, well, let's do this. We ain't going to hire your people, but we'll help train them. So we was like, okay, well, we can do that. So what we did was we start getting the laborers, getting them going in, getting the training. We have one young lady now is a flagger. She makes $42 an hour. $42 an hour. And she only trained for 4 months. So the point of the matter is, me too, because remember, I'm nonprofit. Is that thing being recorded now? Nonprofit? No. But the point of the matter is our lives, our clients' lives is much better since we are documented. And what you mean, how is their lives are better? Because we know where their shortcomings, what they failed at, when they made that left turn, when they shouldn't have made that right. So now we're discussing what happened, what we should do, what we can do better. But I'm telling you, as of now, since January, we don't suck no more. So we are getting better with that. We're sharing that. And what happens is we partner with a radio station called WGCI in Chicago. And that's an urban radio station. So every Saturday, what happens is that we'll get a success story, and we'll go on and we'll meet with their personality, and they'll tell them, hey, we're cleaning up such and such over in Inglewood on this day. We're going over here with that day. And that's how we get them to buy in, because they're on the radio station. We come in, we sign them up, and then from when we sign them up, they just need a GED or they need a link card to help, or whatever the case may be, or they're trying to get on the Section 8 with their mom. So what we do is the City of Housing, we'll help them with that. I hate Chicago is not in here. Chicago VRS, what they did was they worked with the commissioner in Chicago. And so what happened is, long as they haven't been arrested within the last 6 months and they're either in school or working on a skill, they can receive subsidized housing or be on the list. The men that have lost with their children, what happens is they work with the mother and the father. We have parenting classes now to do that. We was just doing it. There was no data. We was just doing it. And so now when they say, hey, we need to see this. So the Chicago Crime Lab came in and saved us. So what they do is with the Strength and Family Program, they meet every Saturday. We do the first Saturday of the month is more classroom. Second Saturday, they're going out doing family time together. Third is again classroom. And then if it's the fourth Sunday, we all go to church and then we come back that following Monday, and then they get whoever donated, whether it was Target or Sears, then the kids go off in their merry little way. But our process now has gotten much better with Axiom with the drop-down box, because we can do it on our phones now. We don't need and Google documents. I'm telling you, that's the bomb. So if you meet with them out there, we do the Google information right there. When you get back in the office or you get in your car, you transfer the information over to Axiom into the drop-down box. And that's evidence-based practice.
And you don't suck anymore.
I don't suck no more.
So I appreciate everything you guys said, because data is so incredibly important. I'm also just wondering if there's a way, because the data is important to get community buy-in, why not make community part of that research and data? Is anybody asking community members, what's safety to you? What's shifted since X intervention? What have you noticed about your community members, your family members? Do they feel any safer? Numbers say one thing, but also making sure that you're having conversations with folks that are deeply impacted by this is also key.
Okay, so I'm going to go rogue here. Rather than ask another question that the panel's not prepared for, okay, I'm going to start a little early in a moment and open it up to questions. But I just want to take a minute. First of all, thank God for Sheldon, because this is nap time, and he's made sure we've stayed awake. But I'm also really grateful for our panel. I think there's been a lot of interesting ideas, dynamics, and kind of, I'll use the cliche, outside the box thinking, and different sites in different stages of changing the street dynamic. So let's give them a hand, okay? Okay. I'm surrendering the mic, so we're going to have you guys ask questions.
Hi, my name is Lisa Clemens. I'm from Minneapolis. I'm a retired Minneapolis police sergeant, and I run an organization called A Mother's Love. And I did that because I didn't like the fact that mothers were always left out in the equation. So I'm really glad you're here. My niece was murdered. One of the members of my team, her son murdered somebody, so he's in prison for 30 and a half years. So we put together a diverse group. But the reason that question about mothers being involved is important, because I ask it every time I go anywhere, because we're absent. So if you say we're 70% heads of our households, especially mothers of color, black women, then why are we not at the table? Because a lot of our men are either dead, in prison, or just not in the home. So why are we not? So I stopped going to city address and state address, because the only thing they talked about in those were the black man, the black son, which they should. But they continue to ignore the black woman and the black daughter. So I'm glad to hear everybody here understands that that dynamic needs to be out there too. So I'll leave you with this, and I always say this, it's my little mantra. If you save the mother, you save the child. You save the father, you save the family. You save the family, you save a community.
That's good. That's real good.
A few thoughts about engaging mothers.
Sure, just real quick. So in Detroit, one of our strongest partners is an organization called Mothers of Murdered Children. The leader of that is Andrea Clark, very similar story, and it's a lot of mothers who've lost their children to gun violence. And so they're part of our call-ins. There are, there are peace walks that we do every other Friday. They're a part of those peace walks. So there's an ongoing conversation and relationship with that group. They're such a valued asset to our community. So we have to make sure that that conversation continues and that partnership continues for sure.
And real quick, in Chicago, I hate to keep harping on this, but the Sisterhood program real quick. Could you talk about that real quick pertaining to the women on how because they come to the table. Those guys that's in that circle, the police, the U.S. attorney can say whatever they want to say. But when she get up, that's where the impact is at. So the mothers are the ones, are the backbone of the family. We're trying to get us to fix this situation. Could you please just talk about it a little bit? Please?
With the Sisterhood, we were actually one of the co-founders. I was invited to a potluck. I call it a potluck with other mothers. You know, we just gathered around and ate. And 6 of us, we knew each other. We wasn't getting anything. We could have ate at home. And I was like, let's form our own group. And one lady introduced us. One of the sisters introduced us. She said, I know a lady. She used to own her own youth center. She used to run a youth center. And that's how the Sisterhood got started. But I'm speaking tomorrow, so I'll speak more about it tomorrow.
Okay. Sneak preview. Sneak preview. What else? The women. Fatma. Mothers.
They're important. I mean, I think that's true also in the way we talk about domestic violence as well. You know, we talk about this being collateral effects. It's not only about the individual survivor, but how that affects children, how that affects other family members, how that affects communities. So there, again, another strong parallel between both worlds, and I'm wondering if there's a way to learn from, you know, what the domestic violence field has done with their task force and multidisciplinary teams, you know, kind of pulling and learning from there, you know, how to integrate some of those voices.
You need some African-American mothers involved in this. And 3 years later, the highest number that they deal with is African-American mothers, and there's still no African-American mothers part of that group. So you're 100% right.
Hey, good afternoon. Great stuff, guys and gals. Great stuff. Detroit, you're on the one. You have the mayor and the chief. Yes, sir. Chicago, you and I in Minnesota have to do some work. I'm Randy Freeman. I'm from St. Paul, Minnesota, and I represent the Community Ambassador Initiative. And that is my question. We have the chief of police, but we can't get buy-in from the mayor's office. And we're doing outstanding work in the community. I mean, we have, like you say, we have all the heavy hitters that is about the work, not just want to do the work. Yeah. They really have the passion for the work. But we just can't get the mayor to buy in.
So I don't know if anybody specifically can take credit for that. I think it just kind of how the work was introduced into the city of Detroit, and it wasn't even under the current mayor. So the mayor before him, Mayor Dave Bing, yes, who was actually was very instrumental in bringing Ceasefire Detroit to the city, and Mayor Duggan has just been extremely supportive. He's never, I think he's missed one call in. We've done tons of them, and I think he's only missed one. It's only because he had to be here for some major deal. Yes. One call in, and it was a serious business. But he's so dedicated, and that's what I'm talking about when you talk about, you know, these folks in, you know, high leadership, right? They're setting the tone for everybody else. They're setting the tone for a community. They value the work that we do, and that's really what makes the difference for us. But for me, it was just kind of organic, and just how it all got going, and we're just kind of a recipient of, you know, how it got introduced. But it really came in through Mayor Dave Bing. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes.
Mr. Smith, Sheldon. Actually, I haven't lived in Chicago in a while, but my family and our oldest daughter's there. But I'm real curious about what you said about the police department. And it seems that from what we've heard and studied, that the police department involvement is critical for being on the scene, so that you are there moments within the time of a shooting, or you know what's brewing. And I'm curious, in the development of your program, at the initial setting of the program, was the police department invited to be at the table and to join in the construction of and design of the program?
Our former superintendent, which came from New York, he was a buy-in. Gary McCarthy was a buy-in, period. But then when our new chief took over, new superintendent took over, he believes in it, but he's one of those cops of cops. Don't believe in counseling. They believe that should be with the social service department. But his commanders do. Every commander in the district, and I have to talk about, which we didn't see. You saw on that first video earlier, you seen a sergeant, but Commander Cato in the 15th district in the Austin area, he is one of the leading forces behind CPD with our initiative. Because what happens is that in the training, in the police training, you're getting taught about the Chicago violence reduction strategies. They have to work with the Chicago violence reduction team before they graduate out of the academy. But the superintendent, we still working with him because he's just one of those old beat cops, beat the hell out of you and send you home. But the community, the way we're in now, the commanders are buying in. They do back to school. They do barbecues throughout the year, not just for certain subjects, but the superintendent, that's just I'm going to need a magic wand. Anybody know Bewitch? That's what I'm going to need for him. Oh, yeah. Dun, 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 dun.
And also, I think that's a great question, right? Because the police do need to be at the table. I mean, we were lucky just because my supervisor is a former police officer, retired after 27 years. So when you start talking about credibility, you know, we talk about a lot of these guys having credibility on the street. Well, he has credibility in the police department. So he can go in there and say, you can do that, you can't do that. Yes, you can. You can give us those names. You can give us, you know, we're not asking for any active cases. So he's bridging that gap on that level because he was high up in the command structure in one of the police departments around New York State. So it's part of having somebody that, you know, might have come from that walk of life, but understands that, you know, you have to do it through community of change and be able to walk through those doors and represent you through those doors as well.
Good afternoon. My name's Monica Slaughter, and I'm from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which is a relatively small community compared to the bigger ones. But what we're seeing is an increase in violence, especially gun violence. We have been fortunate enough over the last couple of years, which stemmed from a police shooting of an unarmed black man, to have developed this roundtable where we all get together and we talk and we're recognizing issues. My opinion of that, and one of the reasons that I'm at this conference, is that we're not getting plans in place. And most of the speakers that I'm hearing today are talking about these organizations and now they're established, but what I'm not hearing is how did you get there? We want to do something. And for those of us who want to do something but don't know how, we don't know where to go or what to do or how many people is too many people at the table and too many ideas. And you see where I'm going with this? I don't even know what my question is other than how do we get there to where there's something in place that we're making and effectuating change? That's a great question.
Well, first, and I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, the first thing you need to reach out to is Isaac and reach out to Mr. Smith. They can give you the groundwork because our agency, we came in, we were already established. We've been doing it since 1972. So we just jumped on board with a policy that was going into place that was really helping our community. So we were blessed by that. We didn't have to do a startup. But these are the two, I promise you, if you get their information today and reach out to them, they will actually show you, even people to talk to in Cedar Rapids, to get what you need to do. Because at the end of the day, if we don't do it now, it's going to be a bigger epidemic than what it is now. So, but the most important piece, I'm tooting your horn because they are the ones who started from the ground up. They did the build up. I was blessed to just come in, it was already done. You know, it is. I remember, I told y'all, I screwed up. But at the end of the day, with these brothers' initiative, because if we don't do it, the police department won't do it. I don't care how many police at the table, they need to be at the table, but that won't happen. To start off where these brothers started off from, to come from where they came from, and to be where they're at, I praise South Bend. South Bend, I'm telling you right now, everybody talk about Oakland, this. South Bend started it from the ground up to where it is today. And to see, I was my first time visiting South Bend, to see the face of hope that those brothers and sisters had coming through that center, to see their face from going from hopelessness to hope. I'm telling you, it's the bomb. Please reach out to them, and it is. And if you need any assistance with us pertaining to grants, working on how you get federal grants, how to assist you with the ground-ups, with the nonprofits in your area to even assist you starting your own, do not hesitate. Give me a call. We got some of the best grant writers that will be able to help you.
Don't reinvent the
Right. Yes. That's what I was going to say.
That's why we're here.
And Sheldon, I appreciate that, but that brother took nothing and made it something.
Right there.
Him, Isaac Hunt. He was on the panel before this one, but the work that he's doing, the outreach work he's doing in South Bend is phenomenal. And he always tells us, I'm stealing from Detroit, but this brother here, man, he's doing an awesome work in South Bend. Yes, so a lot to learn from him, for sure.
I better have my ribs later.
So good afternoon. Is this on? Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
All right, cool. So my name is Corey Priest. I'm from Wilmington, Delaware. I now work for the Department of Justice, Attorney General's Office as a community outreach specialist. Formerly incarcerated. I did a few years in jail, came home and have been on the grind ever since. And they saw fit to put me in their office to do this work. The question I have is, how do we engage? And I'm only been in this position for 8 weeks. So how do we engage prosecutors to be more involved in Black and brown communities, meet in the margins, understand where we're coming from, and why this stuff exists? I'm new to the criminal division in the state of Delaware. So I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. It's my passion, right? I can be a systemic change agent. But I need ideas, innovative ideas, to get our prosecutors more involved before a crime is committed, afterwards, and after incarceration for our individuals going through our criminal justice system. So give me some ideas, if you guys have them, or if there are prosecutors in your areas that's doing things already.
One of our prosecutors is in the room, sitting right there, Mr. Terrence Huckleberg. Yes, he's a phenomenal partner. But yes, go ahead.
Oh,
yes.
I can just tell you, if you work for the Attorney General's office for your state, then he or she should be head of all the various county offices. And if he's got enough sense, or he or she's got enough sense to hire you, then he or she has enough sense to reach out to them to put this on their agenda, to get behind. I work for a U.S. Attorney's office, and my U.S. Attorney is on board with this 100%. The U.S. Attorney before him, she was on board 100%. So we have a great partnership with Ceasefire. I love it because I come from the community. I come from the same circumstances as a lot of those guys. So when the call-in is over, I have to go through a script for the call-in. But when it's over, I sit down at the meal and I talk to them and I tell them, hey, look, I grew up in a housing project, single mom, okay? Just like maybe you did, but I had people in my life, my mom and grandma, who pushed me, said, no, you're going to be something better. You're going to be something different. So I sit down and I relate to them because it's important to me. And I think it's important to them that many of them, they don't see positive role model, Black male. And so I try, in the circumstance there, just uplift them. Because as Quincy said, this really is ministry work. I'm already doing this type of work through my church, mentoring young men. So this is just, to me, an outreach of continuing that. And I get paid to do it.
Yeah.
Also, I want to mention that out of Terrence's office, I run a program that has worked with the largest amount of returning citizen probationers in the city of Detroit, Wayne County. They've been coming in my program for 10 years, speaking to those groups on just a calm, unofficial purpose and explaining the law to them and walking them through how to avoid it and things of that nature. So his office is just phenomenal and unbelievable. Huh? Yeah, and they stole my best staff person last year to go to work for them.
And our Attorney General is Kathleen Jennings in Delaware, and she's been phenomenal. So I just wanted to put that on record. Yeah. Right, thanks.
Yeah.
Was this show being recorded?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Sofia Montenegro, and I'm the Community Liaison at the Miami-Dade County Public Defender's Office. I'm here with Tammy Gray, and Public Defender Martinez brought a group of us from Miami. he was talking about what can prosecutors do, but I can tell you that our public defender has created a office that the culture of the office is educating the community, giving back to the community, supporting the community, and it's incredibly engaged in changing the way, the laws and creating programs that lift the person who has had contact with the criminal justice system. One of the programs that we do is the sealing and expungement of records, and we did restoration of civil rights in the communities for many, many years. The program was so successful that it was replicated by the prosecutor. It's very important that when you are doing the kind of work, you can engage your local public defender's office. The program is called Redemption. We also teach the consequences of an arrest and conviction at the police academy, where the new police officers who are going to work in the community or who are transferring from one department to the other, they understand what happens to the person beyond the handcuffs. So the office created a manual that it's pretty comprehensive about Florida law. It's 99 pages, and it explains all of the consequences of what happens to that human being once he gets arrested and once he gets convicted. And the reason why I think we teach to law enforcement, it's because there's a lot of arrests that are discretionary. And if the police officer starts to understand what happens to that person and the ripple effects, then the change begins. And they can free themselves up to do the more serious work. So we also have a partnership with our faith-based community, and it's pretty comprehensive. So when you're thinking of the Miami-Dade County Public Schools, we teach children the consequences also of that arrest. We have a program called Play It Smart, and it's about constitutional rights and how the children can safely interact with law enforcement. We teach them how important the police officer is and how he's a human being and he needs to get home to a family. So we're starting to create conversations about the human being that the police officer is, and your constitutional rights. Since you're small, since you're a little person who has a future ahead of you. So don't forget the power of your local prosecutor's office, your local public defender's office, because what we do is that now that they have replicated the program, it's a one-stop. We go to their program, they come to ours. And we try to work together because that's really what it's all about. We're trying to create an enhanced public safety, if we can sell it that way, but it's also about the human beings. I mean, this country incarcerates more of the citizens than any other country in the world. And if we don't continue to have these conversations, and remember, even when we talk about domestic violence, the perpetrator, it's probably a victim. The victim, it's another victim. So family intervention, jobs, and opportunities for people who made a mistake. And, we should all be celebrating redemption, the restoration of civil rights and the ability to seal and expunge those records and get that job. Sofia Montenegro, the Miami-Dade County Public Defender's Office. I'm their community liaison. I'm actually like a department.
One thing that you just, touched on that is extremely important, I think it's foundational, and that's building relationships. No matter if it's to the folks you're serving, if it's to a community partner, a potential provider, right? A prosecutor, right? But you're being intentional about having those conversations, getting to know. Like I actually took the time out to have that conversation with Brother Terrence, right? To know his story, to understand his story and what he'd been through, right? But I was intentional about just sitting down and having that conversation. That's just simply building relationships, right? And allowing him or making sure that, he's operating in his lane He does this part at the call-ins, but at the same time, it's important for him to have that opportunity to engage with the guys that we're serving because his story matters. It's impactful, right? But just being intentional about building those relationships, even with law enforcement. I've got to take the time out to reach out, call them, and say, hey, let's chop it up. Can we kick it? Get to know my team. Let me get to know your team. I have to do that. That's a part of the job. So at the end of the day, that is foundational. You have to be intentional about building relationships. That's huge.
And by the way, we talk about changing the street dynamic. That's part of changing the street dynamic. Now, I need to apologize. I've been married twice. I was late to both my weddings. I was intent on keeping the panel on time, and I made a mistake, which I thought we finished at 4. Do we finish at 4:15? 4:15. Okay, I've got one more question for the panels. Now that you know more about me than you're ever going to want to know, okay? When you look at, we have a question.
One more question over here.
And then I'm going to pose one more question.
I'd want to get whoever on the panel wants to address it. One of the things that I found is that peer-to-peer exchange among the practitioners is huge. But one of the things I don't see is, and my CEO, Deb Coble, is here, and I always use Deb all the time for other cities and CEOs that's trying to do this work, because the reason why we're doing it at Goodwill is because of her. Taking the chance on wanting to do something different, right? So a doctor wants to talk to a doctor, right? A CEO wants to talk to a CEO. So why not do the peer-to-peer exchanges among the CEOs, among the prosecutors, among the mayor? Our mayor, Pete Buttigieg, I can literally call him right now on his phone and say, you need to talk to such and such, and here's his number, right? And he'll call immediately and tell you why we doing this strategy. And that's the best way to get people to buy in, to get the mayors on board. And I wanted to hear your opinion about what y'all thought about this as well.
Tag, I'm it, right? No, I think it's absolutely necessary because, you know, what you're hearing is don't reinvent the wheel. I think I've heard that several times, right? And if somebody else has done it and done a good job, why not be able to pick up the phone and call them? I think sometimes, especially in these times of tight money and worried about funding and funding cuts, that we tend to try to be siloed because, you know, this is my thing, these are my numbers, right? But really, if we're really doing this work from the right place, we know we're affecting the community. So it's not about us, it's not about our agency, it's not about our funding, it's about our community. So I think peer-to-peer should be, I think conferences like this where you get to meet different people and get introduced and pass out cards and things like that. I think you have to. I mean, I heard them say, call you, right? They're doing great work in South Bend, Indiana. Even though South Bend, Indiana might be smaller than another city, right? But we're still dealing with the same problems, right? Poverty, hunger. You know, these kids are going to jail at an alarming rate. These young black men are dying at an alarming rate, right? We're still dealing with the same things. The same things are driving it. Why would you try to reinvent the wheel and do something different? I think you have to be able to pick up that phone and call. And I'm hearing these partnerships, right? How do you even know where the partnerships to go? I think you had the question, right? Who should be at the table? Well, you got a lot of people that have had people at the table. And so why not use that knowledge, right, and be able to build from there?
I just wanted to say something. Somebody mentioned about the prosecutors. We also work with people that elect people to offices, too. And prosecutors have to be elected. We have judges on our call-in, too. And we just had an election a few months ago, and we met with him before he got elected to tell him about the call-in to see if he was going to participate. And he said yes. If he had said no, he wouldn't be the judge right now.
Good point.
Here's, as if I need this, here's my final question to the panel, because we've talked a lot about what's been done. And even when you look in the program, it says changing the street dynamic, vendettas, conflict. What's the future? What's the street dynamic going to look like? What's your work going to look like in the future? What do you see ahead? I hear people that say it's online now. It's not gang banging is not the same. These groups are not the same. Whatever words we want to use. Are there going to be vendettas? Are there going to be struggles? What's it going to look like? What are you going to do? Sheldon. We're going to start with Sheldon and work this way.
Thank you a lot.
You're welcome.
Well, first of all, seriously, on a serious note, I can be serious, but not right now. But what it's going to look like, hopefully, throughout the work and throughout working with the national network, that we can really find that master, that peel to alleviate this violence. Can it happen? Yes. Will it happen anytime soon? No, not until we all work together. Until I decide to work with Detroit. Not until I decide to work with people in Chicago. Once we lose the silos, then we all work on the same page. That's when it's going to be. That's what I hope for it to look like, that we're all on the same page. We're doing the work in Indiana. We're doing the work in Rochester, New York. We're doing the same work in Cedar Rapids. We're doing the same work in Stockton. We're doing the same work everywhere, because no matter where we're at, gang violence touches us the same way.
And so, my thought, what would the work look like? In my mind, it'll be institutionalized, right? Because this work has to be institutionalized. It has to be almost like any other thing that's in our towns that we can't not have in our towns. Because the minute we think that we solve this problem is the minute that the problem rears ugly head again. So just because we're at all-time lows in New York or wherever we're at all-time lows in the country, and we say, you know what, we don't have to put any more money, any more resources into doing this type of work, we'll see it again. So it has to be institutionalized. It doesn't have to be something that we're saying this is a 10-year fad. This needs to be a forever fad, because our communities are struggling. They've been struggling. There's many reasons for it. And until we start changing some of those reasons, then we won't see the violence go down. So this needs to be institutionalized. That's what it will look like in the future for me.
For me, it's really creating a movement, and the individuals that we serve are on the front lines, right? They're the biggest contributor. They have the biggest voice, right? And so we're valuing their voice, right? We're empowering them, right, to take more of a leadership role in infusing this movement. They should be the message carriers. They're the ones with the real credibility in the street. So we can get buy-in from them. And I'm really encouraged, because we're starting to see some of that in Detroit with actually gangs who've been feuding for some time, and literally them posting it on social media. This beef that we got with the Bloods is done. Let's do something constructive. Like that literally was posted maybe like 2-3 weeks ago. And so we're starting to see some of that. And there's a lot of opportunities and employment, some other things that are happening in the city. So we're encouraged by that. But from a grassroots, from a ground level, really push that movement forward and really empowering the guys who we're serving.
I hope the future of this work standardizes core principles of being trauma-informed and sensitive, and really individualizing that person in front of you, and also being dynamic. Communities and partners willing to be flexible, willing to think outside of the box, and be unscripted to really meet the individual needs of the client in front of them. So that's my hope.
You can't improve on perfection. Thank you so much.